Imagine for a second that you are, marching on the nation's capital.
Right.
You are fired up. You are ready to demand systemic change for a cause you just feel in your very bones. You have your signs painted, your slogans memorized, and you are entirely prepared to make history.
You're ready to go.
Exactly. But then, right as the momentum builds, you get completely derailed by an incredibly catchy audio clip playing from a nearby phone. Or, even more disorienting, imagine staging a passionate, deeply emotional die-in on the cold concrete steps of government authority, only to slowly realize you are actually lying outside of a Panera Bread.
Right. It's a complete collapse of fundamental situational awareness, because we generally expect civic protest to follow a certain logic,
Yeah.
a clear target, a coherent message, and at the very least, like a basic understanding of physical geography.
Exactly. Which brings us to today. We are stepping into a landscape where that traditional map has been completely scribbled over. We're taking a deep dive into a startling, incredibly detailed report. This document chronicles a massive, almost dreamlike protest that took place in Washington, D.C.
Right.
So our mission today is to unpack the rise of a phenomenon that this source material refers to as social media brain rot, or SMBR. We're going to look at what these sufferers are actually demanding, the bizarre reality of their activism on the ground, and how the government is trying to respond to a crisis they literally lack the vocabulary to even describe.
We have to examine the intersection of neurological conditioning and civic action here. What happens when the medium through which we consume our entire reality rewires how we behave in physical space?
Okay. To really grasp the severity of this crisis, we first have to look at how these symptoms physically manifested during the protest itself.
Right, the actual boots on the ground.
Right. Thousands of people descended on D.C. But right out of the gate, the geography of this march is totally disjointed. They didn't just march on the Capitol or the White House. The report notes they were gathered at the Lincoln Memorial, which, tracks, but also inside a K Street Chipotle.
And, perhaps most revealingly, a mid-range Marriott that several dozen protesters genuinely believed was the United States Supreme Court. But look, if you spend your entire life inside a digital interface, a For You page, where content is algorithmically delivered to you without you ever having to actively navigate towards it, your spatial awareness begins to atrophy. Physical geography requires intentional navigation. Digital spaces just require passive scrolling. So when they tried to translate their online outrage into physical movement, they essentially lost their tether to the real world.
Correct. So right away, you have this massive group of people motivated enough to travel to Washington, but they literally lack the cognitive architecture to navigate it.
Exactly.
And then we get to their actual demands. They are asking for emergency federal funding to study and eliminate SMBR?
Yeah, and the quotes from this are just wild.
They really are. The 20-year-old spokesperson for the group gave a quote that just blew my mind.
What did she say?
She said, "The Sigma grind set has infiltrated our water supply and our grandma's cookie jar. We will not rest or touch grass until the government acknowledges that SMBR is real."
Wow.
And she wants a federal SMBR czar appointed immediately.
What's fascinating here is the profound paradox of this entire situation. You have thousands of people demanding systemic, top-down government solutions to cure their shattered attention spans and regulate their digital behaviors.
Right.
Yet they are aggressively exhibiting the exact symptoms of the condition they are fighting, right there on the protest line. They are trapped inside the medium they are begging to escape.
Yes, if their demands aren't met, they warn they will protest by filming 47-second vertical videos of themselves crying in their cars and posting them with the caption, "POV, you came all this way."
That is the ultimate weaponization of the personal brand. They aren't threatening the establishment's bottom line.
No, not at all.
They're threatening the establishment with a wave of algorithmically optimized digital melancholy. They genuinely believe that algorithmic visibility is the highest form of political leverage.
The behavior on the ground reflects that perfectly, too. The report describes protesters pausing every 7 seconds to check their phones.
Every 7 seconds.
At one point, near the Washington Monument, a group was resisting dispersal, and they linked arms to start a classic "What do we want?" call and response chant. But they forgot the second half of the chant because someone nearby started playing a trending audio clip, and they just organically started lip-syncing to it instead.
I think they are seeking a physical release for a purely digital anxiety.
Right.
The report notes they were occasionally pointing at city pigeons and whispering, "That's literally me." And that highlights a total breakdown of internal boundaries. When you spend years trying to find relatable content on a screen, You start projecting that same desperate search for relatability onto random birds in physical space.
But, if they are coherent enough to organize a trip to DC in the first place, what is physically misfiring in their brains that prevents them from executing a basic protest? Like, what is the actual clinical definition of this rot?
Well, according to Dr. Francine Oden at the American Institute for Digital Neurological Phenomena down in Austin, Texas, there are approximately 80 million Americans currently living with SMBR. That figure represents essentially a quarter of the country's population. It really forces the medical community to ask what constitutes living with this condition. And the symptoms listed in the report are incredibly revealing because they aren't just behavioral. They suggest a fundamental rewiring of how a person processes reality.
Because the symptoms listed are almost entirely linguistic, right? Replacing standard emotional expression with internet shorthand.
Exactly.
It includes using the word delulu in a serious medical context, or describing your landlord as having a low-key villain arc, or pausing a real-life vulnerable conversation to say, wait, this would go so hard as a reel.
We are talking about people whose narrative structure of reality has been entirely replaced by content formats. Every interaction, every frustration, every mundane moment is immediately reframed through the structural logic of a social media platform. You stop living an experience and you start observing yourself living an experience as if you are content to be consumed.
Let's take Tyler Breckenridge, an 18-year-old at the protests. So Tyler was actively addressing an orange construction cone that he had become briefly convinced was a journalist. He told the cone that SMBR had taken everything from him: his attention span, his credit score, his ability to read anything longer than a caption. He actually stated that he attempted to watch a traditional documentary for 6 minutes and had to lie down from the sheer physical exhaustion.
That right there is a profound neurological shift. The cognitive load of sustained narrative is physically taxing for him. The brain operates on neuroplasticity. It optimizes for the tasks it performs most often.
So it adapts to what he does all day.
Exactly. His neural pathways are so accustomed to rapid-fire, low-context dopamine hits that a 6-minute linear story overloads his processing capacity. His brain has quite literally pruned the connections required for sustained attention.
And right after he explained that exhaustion to the cone, he opened Instagram, scrolled rapidly for 40 seconds, and walked straight into a cast iron lamppost.
Oh, geez.
And then there's Bryce Holloway Fenn. He's a full-time content creator from Arizona who marched on Washington after going massively viral, but he didn't go viral for a political speech.
No. He went viral for posting a video of himself standing in front of a bathroom mirror, looking vaguely sad, set to a slowed-down remix of a pop song from 2011.
Which is, a masterpiece of modern digital performance.
It requires absolutely no context, just a universally recognizable aesthetic of vague ambient nostalgia.
But Bryce is completely torn apart by the aftermath of this. The report says his therapist tells him his brain is struggling to form memories that last longer than a single news cycle.
Right.
But the algorithm, the cold calculating algorithm, tells him he is performing exceptionally well. His engagement is up. He says he no longer knows who to believe.
He is caught in a tug-of-war between biological reality and digital metrics.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I have to push back a little on Dr. Oden and the medical establishment's framing here. Is this actually a neurological disease? Like, is there a physical, pathological rot happening in the brain? Or have these 80 million people just completely overwritten their own internal monologue with internet slang? If my car breaks down and I call it my villain arc, am I clinically sick or am I just adapting to a new cultural lexicon?
That gray area is precisely where the most cutting-edge research is focused right now. The report highlights a phenomenon called the doom spiral, which might actually answer your question.
Brain health advocates define this clinically as the sensation of having extremely strong, visceral opinions about a piece of information you encountered 4 minutes ago and will have completely forgotten by dinner. Sufferers are observed cycling rapidly between righteous fury, existential numbness, and the uncontrollable urge to share a meme that they feel really said it all. And whether we label it a strict neurological disease or a severe cultural adaptation almost misses the point. The doom spiral demonstrates that their emotional regulation is inextricably linked to the refresh rate of their timeline. The emotional responses are physiologically real. Their heart rate spikes, the cortisol floods their system, the numbness is palpable, but the catalyst is artificial and entirely fleeting.
It's like having your emotional thermostat hooked up to a random number generator.
That's exactly what it's like.
The people leading this charge are operating on a completely different frequency than the politicians they are targeting. Like, look at David Squires from Portland.
Right.
He shows up to the Capitol on 4 hours of sleep, and he gestures broadly to the Capitol building, a passing bus, the sky, and says to a reporter, "Main character energy. This is the villain origin story of our generation."
Notice the deep sense of detachment in his phrasing there. He is narrating his own political dissent as if he's a passive observer watching a movie about his own life. The detachment isn't a byproduct of his activism. The detachment is the core feature of it.
Then you have Amanda Tanner, the protester, lying on the steps of that Panera Bread, fully believing it's the Department of Health and Human Services. She gives this incredibly passionate quote about believing in awareness and the content-to-meaning ratio being dangerously out of balance in society. She says, "My For You page knew I was sad before I did."
That is a chilling statement about algorithmic surveillance and predictive modeling.
It really is. But then in the very next breath, she stares into the middle distance and admits, "I also came because honestly, it seemed like it would do numbers."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Amanda is perfectly articulating the duality of the modern citizen here. She has a genuine, aching desire for structural change. She recognizes that the content-to-meaning ratio is broken and that her emotions are being mined for data. But she is simultaneously unable to escape the dopamine incentive structure of her own digital presence. She wants to overthrow the system, but she also desperately wants the engagement metrics that come from participating in the overthrow.
It's revolutionary slacktivism, fully monetized by the individual. So how does the United States government respond to this? According to legislative insiders quoted in the report, Congress reacted with, quote, "an almost heroic level of inaction."
Which is perhaps the most predictable element of this entire crisis. The bureaucracy falls back on its own form of algorithmic delay.
And the cultural divide between the lawmakers and the protesters is vast. Take Representative Harold Fitch, a 71-year-old Republican from Ohio. The report notes he observed the protests from the lobby of that Marriott wearing a bolo tie, no less. Naturally. He tells a reporter that he Googled the term SMBR the night before, and his browser has not been the same since.
Oh, no.
He openly admits he doesn't know what a sleigh is, but his aides told him it can be very good or very bad, depending entirely on the tone, and he finds that conceptual fluidity completely exhausting.
Who can blame him?
Right. Then he just takes a piece of a protester's granola bar and walks away. But the most revealing part of the whole report is how the protest actually ends.
Right.
They didn't get dispersed by riot police. They didn't negotiate a landmark settlement with lawmakers. By Tuesday evening, the protest just dissolved.
Just faded away.
Yeah. Because the participants gradually remembered that they had unread notifications, unwatched videos, and in a few cases, actual jobs they had to get back to.
The very condition they were protesting is what ultimately defeated the protest. Their attention spans simply could not sustain the physical reality of a prolonged civic action. The dopamine well of marching dried up, and the biological pull of the screen reasserted itself.
And the organizers didn't even issue a formal manifesto to close it out. They posted a wrap-up message to a private Discord server, and it was just a 22-second voice memo. It announced the next march would be in the coming months, but the location is TBD, the vibe is TBD, the purpose is TBD, and the dress code is chaotic, but make it a moment.
That perfectly encapsulates this movement. It is entirely aesthetic, entirely fleeting, and completely devoid of structural permanence.
Yes.
It highlights a critical systemic vulnerability in modern activism. If your movement is built entirely on the architecture of social media, it is inherently subject to the rules of social media. It must be novel, it must be quick, and it will inevitably be replaced by whatever the algorithm feeds the user next. You cannot build a sustained revolution on a platform designed to distract you from sustained thought.
So what does this all mean? We started with thousands of people marching disjointedly on a Chipotle, a Marriott, and the Lincoln Memorial. We looked at the terrifying reality of 80 million Americans grappling with attention spans measured in mere seconds, people walking into lampposts because they can't stop scrolling, and content creators like Bryce, whose therapists' algorithms are fighting a turf war over their memory recall.
It's a lot to process. It paints a vivid picture of a society at a profound crossroads. We are attempting to solve digital native neurological problems using 20th century analog tools.
Right.
The friction between those two worlds is creating this bizarre reality where people are begging to be saved from the very devices they are using to broadcast their pleas for salvation.
It really forces you to look at your own habits. Like, have you ever felt the urge to narrate your own life like a TikTok video, imagining an audience for your mundane chores?
I think we all have.
Have you ever caught yourself experiencing that doom spiral, feeling an intense, fiery opinion about an article you barely skimmed, knowing deep down you won't even remember the topic by tomorrow? We are all, to some degree, swimming in this water. We are all adapting to the refresh rate.
We are. And that raises a final lingering question that goes beyond the disjointed protests, beyond the government inaction, and beyond the 80 million diagnosed cases. We spend so much time agonizing over how to cure social media brain rot. We try to figure out how to force human attention spans back into reading long-form text and engaging in sustained physical civic action. If human brains are fundamentally adapting to 47-second content cycles, and our emotional responses are increasingly being predicted and shaped by algorithms, perhaps the next evolutionary step isn't a return to the past. Perhaps we shouldn't be trying to force ourselves back into the old molds of linear thought. Maybe we have to consider the terrifying possibility that the very nature of human memory, the way we record history, and the foundation of human communication itself is permanently mutating into something entirely post-verbal.
Yes, a post-verbal world, where we don't write history books or draft legislation, we just curate an endless stream of vibes, reactions, and contextual audio clips.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, the next time you feel the overwhelming urge to lay down and protest the state of the world, you might want to double-check your map. Because fighting for the future of human consciousness is hard enough without accidentally doing it in the parking lot of a Panera Bread.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. See you next time.